Welcome to the Torch Literary Arts Wildfire Reading Series. I am the founder and executive director of Torch, Amanda Johnston. Thank you for that. Torch Literary Arts, if you don't know already, is a nonprofit here in Austin, but we are a resource and destination for Black women writers from around the world. We are here in Austin, Texas. We provide incredible readings like our Wildfire Reading Series, which you are at right now. And we also support independent local bookstores with those readings like Bookwoman. Give it up for Susan at Bookwoman. Second oldest feminist bookstore in the country. It's always been here in Austin, so a true gem of Austin, Texas, and thank you for making
we're a
this.
fan.
Yes.
And we're family and fans of Torch.
Yes, we've been coming. Torch has been here for a very long time. I'll tell you a very brief anecdotal story. I read here in 2004, I think, was the first time I read. It wasn't at this location.
It was at the other one.
It was at another location. And I still lived in Kentucky. I was raised in Austin, but my husband was in the military, so we were in Kentucky at the time. And I came here for the Austin International Poetry Festival, and they had a women's showcase reading that I read at Bookwoman. Then I went back to Kentucky, and then the next year I came home to visit and was here, and the first thing Susan said at the door is like, "Where you been?" I said, "Well, I'm back now." She said, "When are you going to do stuff here?" And that really was what set Torch in motion, to be quite honest. We started Torch as a place online to publish and feature work by Black women writers, but the events taking place here in Austin was because my good friend Susan said, "Let's do more stuff here." So thank you for being a home for us here. And so we make sure you follow Torch online, torchliteraryarts.org, subscribe to the newsletter so that you can find out about all of our incredible events. We also do workshops. We provide workshops free of charge to BIPOC women to develop their craft across poetry, prose, screenwriting, and also professional development. So we have a workshop coming up on the 20th with KB Brookins that is about building your platform as a writer. So do register for that. It will be virtual. And then we've got some great things coming up with our community partners, the Texas Book Festival. You may have heard of them. We're bringing Rachel Eliza Griffith and her debut novel, Promise. And we're also bringing Vivi Francis and her latest collection of poetry, The Shared World. So I hope to see you all at that and other events. But right now, tonight, we have Deborah, yes? Deborah, author of Black Chameleon and other incredible books. Poet Laureate of Houston. Yes. And we are just so thrilled to have you here with us. Thank you so much for coming. I'm going to read your bio. We'll get into that so we know all the good things about it. Yes, and know that it is a condensed bio because you should definitely check out her website to get the full understanding of what this woman has done. We've had an incredible career and we're grateful for it. But some other thank yous, our incredible funders who make all of this possible so that we can, number one, pay people. That is a big part, yes. That's a big part of our work is making sure that Black women writers get paid for their work, that the people who deliver this work are paid because our labor is valuable. Right? Everybody has to pay rent. So thank you to the Poetry Foundation, the City of Austin Cultural Arts Division, the National Endowment for the Arts, the Birding Johnson Foundation, and every individual donor, whether it's $5 or $5,000. It means the world to us. So thank you very much. And I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't also point out that we have QR codes at either end of the building on little plaques so that you can scan them and make a donation if you're able to. We would very much appreciate it. Thank you. And on to our reading. Deborah D.E.E.P Mouton is an internationally known writer, director, performer, critic, and poet laureate emeritus of Houston, Texas. She is the author of Newsworthy, which has also been translated into German. And the recently, oh, you have it? Please, yes. Flex on them, show them. How do you pronounce that?
Berichtenswert.
Thank you, because I wasn't going to attempt it, but I was very impressed. And the recently released memoir, Black Chameleon. Yes. She has been a contributing writer for Glamour, Texas Monthly, Kweli, ESPN's Andscape, and as well as her most notable productions include Marian's Song with the Houston Grand Opera and Plumshuga, The Rise of Lauren Anderson with Stages. Currently, she is a resident artist at the American Lyric Theater, where she will produce her upcoming opera, She Who Dared, alongside composer Jasmine Barnes. Y'all recognize.
Okay.
Give it up!
I was like, I get to put this thing out there. Yay. It's hurting my ears a little bit. I feel like we went through that whole thing of like adjusting to masks, and then it's like we were free, and then we weren't.
Yeah.
And now we need to put them back on again, y'all. Real life. Thank you for having me. One, for Torch. Thank you so much for having me. It's like an honor. One, Poet Laureate. It's a Poet Laureate. And then two, just to sit in the room with all of you all. It feels good to be back in Houston. I just finished a 14-day European tour. So this has been like the next event, which I was like, I'm back in Texas. Breathe again. Like, you don't have to explain cultural references anymore, which is cool. So I hope that I don't like to just like talk at people. I like to talk with people. So I hope that we can talk and vibe and connect and share this little baby book baby of mine. I am wildly proud of. It's gorgeous because D.E.E.P Mouton is phenomenal. If you don't know D.E.E.P Mouton, she's a Texas-based author. Another Black woman. She's dope, and this is her artwork, and I'm so grateful she let me use it. But all her stuff is like this dope, so you should definitely check her out. But for me, Black Chameleon, you know, it sits in the space of memoir. I'll be honest, that's because a publisher said it does. I wasn't quite sure what it was when I was writing it, but I knew that the kinds of stories I wanted to tell wanted to talk to each other, and that was the most important thing for me, was figuring out that these stories around my mother and my aunts and my grandmothers also wanted to talk with mythology and folktale and fairy tale, and I wanted to blend them all together, and that is exactly what Black Chameleon does. So I'm not going to read you the opening myth because it's very long, but I will give you an abbreviated version so that way you kind of understand the premise of the book, which is the women who were blind, which I claim as my descendants, right? Because in Black culture, we don't really know where we come from half the time, right? We're always grasping for some understanding and tied to Africa with no real place to put our fingers, unfortunately. And so for me, a friend of mine asked me what mythology I grew up believing. And I was like, Jesus, right? Like, I'm struggling to find something beyond that identifies me as Black and woman and American, complicated. But how do I make that then if it doesn't exist? And so the first myth I wrote was how Black women got eyes in the back of their head, right? And for me, it was this conversation, this wrestling with Yemiya, that was a Black woman on a plantation who was like, I'm not going to witness this anymore, right? I will blind me, my children, we all be blind, I don't care. And her daughter wanders into the ocean and drowns. And she's like, I don't want to be blind anymore, but what do I do about it? And in wrestling with the gods, finds herself with a second set of eyes, which I feel like all Black women kind of hold, right? This responsibility of seeing the world and not being able to shy away from it, even if we want to. And so that led me into this crazy journey of figuring out, how do I give people the context of understanding who we are as Black women, and then give you the great story about my mom sitting on the toilet and whooping me, y'all, because that's where I okay, that's the way I had to make the book. Yeah? And so for me, you know, Black Chameleon is much about that, right? It's much about growing up with a Black mama who came from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, right?
Tuscaloosa,
Look, Tuscaloosa, right?
I was college there.
See? And even though I grew up in Southern California, I tell people the South was very much my home, right? Because I came home to the South every single day, and she wasn't gonna let me forget it. And so for me, this is the kind of stories you're getting ready to hear. Enough of the preface. You just want to hear the work, and that's the most important part. So this section comes from a section that's centered around Black hair, because it's been a journey, y'all. It's been a journey. I guess my mother figure being heard came second to being held. The things we sacrifice on the altar of love. We all want it smooth like the pictures, like the fairy tales of blonde ladders and tower deliverance, like silk strands billowing in the wind, the ones that have never broken a comb or woken up coiled with an attitude. I remember wanting to be that kind of lovable, rummaging through pictures of Hathor and Oshun, seeing nothing like that in the mirror, trying everything to tame myself into something more dark and worthy. I remember praying for my mother to make me something people could devote themselves to. Mama, make me a girl for picture day. Pull the blue dress from the closet back, the one with the happy face flat on the chest. Test the metal straightening teeth till the paper towel doesn't brown. Burn my head beautiful. Bite me at the root and yank the kink halfway down my back, making me look like the girls in Teen Vogue. It's the 7th grade. My legs are lanky and my breasts are coming soon. It's the Lord's Day, so make it straight and narrow. Slick back my edges, slip the prongs against my tender scalp, wrangle every baby hair close enough to wince. I want to be sleek, gleaming in the sun. I want to not sleep between the headache and the heartthrob where the pretty lives. Then the boys can see that I am not one of them, that I am a lady, one it is okay to love.
Come on.
So as you can see, I'm a poet. I didn't really go anywhere. I think for me, so much of entering spaces of prose as a poet lives in lyricism, but also, I personally biased, think that if you're a poet, writing everything else becomes easier, right? You tap into language and imagery and things so much easier. The toolkit is more full, right, when we come to it. But the stories seem to be more full to my own and others. And so for me, I wanted to continue that, but also figure out how do I bridge into some really interesting storytelling. I want to give you an example of how mythology works in this book. No, I'm not going to do that one. Sorry, I had it marked. Doesn't want to do the thing now. There it is. So for me, I didn't want there to just be like, here's a myth, and then here's a story, and then here's a myth. I don't think that's how truth works, right? I think that truth is all over the place. I think that truth is transcendent. I think my truth and your truth are wildly different, and they're both still true, right? Someone asked me, how do I feel about truth in this book? And I will take an answer given to me by someone else who resonated with the book. She said, my father has this picture on the mantle of holding this giant fish over his head. And my whole life, I thought my father was this like beastie fisherman, right? I was like, he's badass, right? And she got older and her mom was like, your daddy didn't catch that fish. And she was like, what do you mean? This thing that I've known my whole life about my father, who he is. And she's like, that fool didn't catch that fish. She was like, the neighbor caught that fish and cleaned it and gave it to us and we ate it. It was good. He just posed with that fish, right? And she was like, but everything I've known and believed to be true of my father was a protector, was a provider, was strength and power. And even if the picture wasn't valid, it was a certain kind of truth, right? And I think that that's the things that we hold with us. When we think about memoir, we think of holding so fast to this nonfiction, but I think there is another space. That's a space of gathering truth, right? That blends the line between how we remember it. Yeah, it's a great premise. Oh, I will also say, I read this stupid statistic that said that women are the most confident at the age of 10. Ooh. Right?
No.
I felt some kind of way about that.
At 10?
So, I think a section of this book really was me dealing with this idea. I have a 10-year-old daughter. I'm thinking about what happened at 10. What is the shift? If that's the truth, right? If I'm going to claim that as the truth, then something has to happen around that age that redefines who we can become later on in life. I don't know. I don't know if it's true, but I was 10. Entering the doors of Starburger after my mother lifted the ban on eating there due to their support of apartheid. She said we wouldn't support racism. I just wanted my waffle fries. Once Nelson Mandela made his way home, we sat under the single smiling star pulsing in a strip mall in the desert, happy to be back, ordering our bacon western cheeseburgers and the crunch of perfectly fried potato hashtags. There was a long line when we arrived. My brother and father told my mom their orders before slipping out the back door to the patio to hold our table. I danced eagerly, sliding my body under and over the chain link divider like it was a game of Chinese jump rope I just couldn't kill. My mother tried to reel in my body from bumping into other patrons. She reminded me that we were not born from grace. Maybe the child had not fully left my body, but I was twice the size I should be. An emerging townhome in my mother's eyes. I wanted so much to find my own gangly independence, and my mother felt me pulling. So, once all was paid for, she tasked me with holding the plastic tin number and waiting by the long bar under the pickup sign for our order. She joined my father and brother outside where the sun was just warm enough to cut the chill of fall. I danced around, imagining that the floor was made of lava, that the black tiles fell into a helpless abyss, and the white tiles held the safety of shaky cliffs. I fed the Tamagotchi that Monique gave me in one of our rare interactions, even though I never wanted to play mother prematurely the way she and T had, both becoming parents before gaining graduation caps. I was still a child myself. I played a dozen songs in my head and sang them all backwards, and the wait seemed endless. They eventually called my number. There were 2 trays of drinks for 4, but I was sure my mile-long arms and flat chest would serve me well. I balanced the trays on my forearms and the drinks triangled together between my fingers. Then I started my approach towards the glass door in the back. People watched in awe. As step after step, the cups of orange soda and cola sloshed back and forth but never tipped. All were so impressed that no one offered to help. Not the freckled-faced employees, not the mothers with 3 kids of her own screaming for them to stay in their seats in the back corner. Not even the man who watched me the entire time I was in line creating my own dance club. I noticed him when we first walked in. He sat alone at a table near the door reading his paper, glancing up occasionally and then quickly disappearing behind the text again. He was enamored with me. Each stare longer than the last. By the time the fries and drinks joined my act, he was entranced, with my off-kilter teetering. I made my way toward him. I could see my family on the back porch under the metal umbrella's red and white sanctuary. I shifted and shifted as I tried to find a third hand to push the bar of the door open into the fall air. Any extra appendages, prehistoric relic members, then an idea. I turned my back around and hurled my butt into the bar, sending the door flying into the wind. As it opened, the crowd seemed unmoved by all my quickening genius. All but the paper man by the door, who folded back the entertainment section and howled, "So that's what all that ass is for." Loud enough for the entire restaurant to stop and examine all my 10-year-old Hottentot exotic. I cut my eyes hard at him, the way my mom did the first time I said a cuss word in front of her. Hard enough to make the room begin to shake. His body gave over into violent convulsions. The families at the tables around him began snatching their children close. His hands radiated, his chest bulged. The ceiling fought to hold his rising back. By now, the nearbys had taken to full sprints. Then his face peeled away, and before me stood Akarema, the greatest warrior spirit. Born of a restless dust devil, he made the brown projects cower with his white gaze. The strength of 12 settlers in one hand, and the brawn of 4 grandmothers who won their rounds with death in the other. The star-spangled Spitfire soul slayer. His legs stretched high and wide, his stovepipe hat splintering through the roof and up to the heavens. He began to violently sling tables and soda machines at the wall. The land before us became a fast food desert. Akarema's sharpened finger, brandished as a sword, won the length of 3 Cadillacs and the sharpness of the crop god's tongues. He pointed at me, as if to initiate the ultimate duel. I leapt behind the counter, spilling all the food onto the checkered floor. I made the cashier give me her red hat as a helmet, and I used one of the serving trays as a shield. Akarema, like the legend says, alternated finger slices and exhales so rancid that he could level an entire army with just the smell of his breath. I held my air and looked for a way to fight back. I searched my pockets but found only a pack of sunflower seeds. They would have to do. I loaded my mouth with a handful and hopped over the pickup station. Akarema saw me and cocked the large blade to come down on me, but I was too fast. The padding of my hips softened at the slide as I glided across the floor and waited for my moment. Akarema inhaled deeply to power a deadly belt, and I machine gun spat every last one of those seeds from the barrel of my mouth. Most missed, but one arched with perfect perfection and landed in the slack-jawed mouth of Akarema. Instantly, he knew what I had done. The salt from the seed spread across his tongue and down the backside of his throat until a cough ensued. He tried to drown it out by slurping the exploded soda from the seed that had formed near the entrance, but that only made the seed hungry for soil. Within seconds, Akarema felt the roots protruding up through his stomach into his lungs. Desperate to stop the spread, he charged through the wall and turned the restaurant into rubble. He began to grab clumps of parking lot, swallowing the rocks that tumbled down from the nearby mountains, in hope that they would bury the sprout that now leafed polyps from his nose and sought to invade his head. He swallowed more and more until he fell into the ground, too heavy to fight. Akarema tried to claw the plant out. He thrashed about, destroying cars and buildings, and I knew he wouldn't stop until he was free or everything around him ceased to exist. I did what I had to. I bent Akarema's long finger back with both hands until it broke free. Then I approached, swinging it as high and as hard as I could. It landed in the middle of his lips, cracking his skull from jaw to crown, bursting the polyps. But there was no blood. Instead, doubts like a horde of horseflies in incantation filled the sky above Akarema's ruptured head. Looking for noses to invade, they found me. And I was not light enough to fly away. So for those that don't know, Akarema is America backwards. And so thinking about how do I bring in like the gods of that we erect in our own systems, right? This for me was the god of doubt. To me, America stands for doubting yourself everywhere you go, right? Every turn you get, you're gonna doubt yourself for something America done did. And so I think for me, letting Akarema be embodied in this actual godlike body made a whole lot of sense. You know, thinking about Neil Gaiman's American Gods for me was important to think that once a god stops being believed in, they cease to exist. And I think we still believe in the systems of America so much in our society, right? We believe that doubt is powerful. We believe that fear is powerful in ways that we probably don't want to admit. Okay, so because this next one's a little longer, then I want to get through it. That's all, just 3.
You ain't heard me say nothing.
So I was talking to Amanda and I was like, you know, you do these big. I did my book tour was 29 stops over 4 months.
Wow.
It's a huge book tour all over the nation. And so you kind of get tired of reading the same pieces. So I was like, tonight I want to read something different. Y'all cool with that?
Yeah.
If it's too long, just be like. Having a daughter has been interesting. I was really scared when I had her because I was like, I don't know how to be a woman. How am I supposed to do this? I'm gonna teach you, and I ain't figured it out yet, girl. But I think that she has taught me much about my womanness, and she's living in such a time that she has to define it as I'm defining it, right? I think the first thing that event in history that she remembers clearly holding and watching was the Women's March right after Donald Trump was elected. And just to think of like that is like her 9/11 in some ways, right? Like that's the thing that she remembers clearly. For me, we had a nice little talk about it. So I was like, I want to read the section after 45 got in office. You know, name that fool. The night of his election, I fell asleep. I had spent the entire day listening to the what ifs from my progressive liberal white coworkers. Most of their rainbow flags trembling at the fear of that he would repeal gay marriage. And while that was a real threat, and recent laws, there were so many additional reasons I feared him becoming president. His previous support of the 3 strikes rule, his villainizing black bodies, his financial support of gentrification. I was tired of watching all of the horrendous outcomes. But that leaf falling night, I felt like there was no winning. So I went to bed right after singing Sleep Over My Daughter. By morning, the chirp of birds met hollow wind and the feeling that the deed had been done. I rolled over, picked up my phone, and opened my browser to the news that he had won. My first instinct was to divert to an alternate timeline, but in every one I found great progress only met with bigger thumbs. If history had its way, this soil would tell of Michelle in mourning clothes, but enough of us pushed back. I remember rising disappointment but not disbelief. Bertha's spirit still stirring in me, I knew I had to get back to work. A new job had pulled me across town 2 years earlier, one side of the bullseye to the other. I thought abandoning my formal teaching job for something more community-centered would make room for greater impact. I landed at a literary arts organization positioned in the affluent museum district that worked at giving back to students all over Space City. This time, my boss was a woman, and while only one other shared my hue, I was tired of being talked down to by the older men who felt like I had nothing wise to offer. This was meant to be my fresh start, a place where I would relish arriving at the office early. The introvert in me has always loved the quiet moments. I could spend all morning making calls and sending emails in my solitude, and then disappear to do a campus visit or work with students to sharpen their tongues in the afternoon, returning to quick chats over the hummus in the communal kitchen or recommendations of women-centered grants that just became available. But that morning's arrival came with an unexpected twist. In the place of merriment and hope that existed just 24 hours before, sat a chill that only comes with shattered delusion. I wrapped myself in the maroon sweater I kept over the back of my chair for the days the other women had hot flashes. The first couple employees arrived, 2 white women dressed from head to toe in smudged cinder, like the whole world had burned down. Then the next few, also dressed in ash. By the time the office was full, I was clearly the red dress at the funeral. One of the women in soot came and sat on the chair near my desk in disbelief. Her eyes filled with water, and she lamented about how disappointed she was with this country. She told me about how she felt knowing that she wasn't safe, said she couldn't imagine living every day in this fear. I couldn't help but crave popcorn. When she was done, Moni, the only other one with skin like mine in our office, arrived in a rainbow of clothing. She felt the chill and nodded to ask me what's up, in the way we do without words. Did I mention this site gave us that too? I replied, Trump. We laughed. Our boss came in and sat in the chair of our office, pink gleaming from behind her black collared shirt. She took a pensive breath and began to explain how she never personally felt this targeted before. She just knew he would undo all the progress they had made. She began to well up. She and her wife feared how their lives may change. She worried that the public beatings and suicides among young queer teens would continue to rise. Moni and I watched as the black she wore felt more like skin. There was a part of me that wanted to empathize. If no one understood what it felt like to wait for fear at your back door, it was me. To wonder if the thing you couldn't change would be the thing to herald death's name. Moni had an extra layer with her love for men and women. Some days I worried for her even more, but we had lived as fear's neighbor for so long, and this election was nothing more than a familiar smell from a bordering yard. But the woman in soot had never lived like this before. On this street where you wonder whether your children will return home unboxed and breathing, whether you will either. Seen when they just wanted to blend in with safety. And so many had never considered that there was a reality outside of their own that had always lived nearby. One that was native and homegrown, fear unbridled. When she left our office to join the wake at the water cooler, Moni and I couldn't help bursting into laughter. It wasn't the malicious pointed finger. I imagine it was the laughter my great-great-grandmother passed down when the slave master heard himself whipping our mothers too wildly. This laughter said, now you get it, you understand, the work can really begin.